Welcome back to Learning Lashon HaKodesh. Today we are on the letter Kof. This is the 19th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The letter Kof alludes to God's Kedusha, which means holiness. The term holiness of God conveys the message that He is supremely exalted, according to the Maharah. God is unlimited. He is not obligated to anything existing, nor is He related to anything existing. The rabbis teach, since He is unbounded to anything in a way that human beings on this earth are bound to physicality and concepts such as time, well, God's spirit and presence penetrate the entire universe. So in Judaism, the concept of holiness implies that the subject is removed from other matters. If an object is holy, it has a degree of sanctity that forbids its use for ordinary pleasure. If a person is holy, he is on a higher level than others. God is holy in the sense that no being, whether human or spiritual, nothing can be compared to him. So let's look at the name and the form of this letter. Here are some examples of gematria, which are the numerical values of words or letters in the Hebrew alphabet. So the very name of the letter Kof has a numerical value of 186. I had prepared the numerical values beforehand. And then, what is the gematria? What is the numerical value for the word makom, which means the omnipresent? Refer back to the lesson on the letter mem. Makom literally means place. Well, it also has a numerical value of 186. So in this way, we're connecting God's holiness as a completely set apart entity to his divine name of Makom, place or omnipresent, describing his active involvement and never-ending presence. So look at the very form. I'm going to draw a kof, right? The rabbis say that the way you draw a kof is by first you draw the letter kaf, and then you draw the letter vav. Okay, remember what the kaf looks like, remember what the vav looks like. Technically, that is a kof, and the entire point of that interpretation is because of the numerical value. Remember, kaf equals 20, vav equals 6, in total is 26. Okay, and remember, this number represents God's personal name, the Tetragrammaton, the Yod He Vav He, the ineffable name. Now, what about the concealed aspect? Now, when the rabbis talk about the concealed aspect, it refers to the other letters that make up the name of the letter. So, for example, while, let me show you right here, Kof is the name of the letter. This is how you spell out the name. The first letter is the revealed aspect, the letter, and then the second and third letter, or the remaining letters, are considered the concealed aspect. So Vav plus Fe, or the 6 plus 80, is 86, right? And this is seen in the same gematria as the word Elohim. If you don't remember the word Elohim, you can look back to the very first lesson, lesson 1, on the letter Aleph. Elohim is typically described as just God, which has a numerical value of 86. So even though God's Kedusha, God's holiness, is metaphysical, making it inconceivable to man, the Torah still demands us, or still demands the reader, to imitate God's holiness. Kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani. Holy shall you be, for holy am I. This is from Leviticus chapter 19. What relationship can there be between the holiness of God and the holiness of man? People are not innately holy. Man's holiness is a reflection of God's absolute holiness and purity. So to raise a human status of Kedusha, they must attach themselves to God by conforming to his commandments. According to Rabbi Hirsch, man's sanctity results from a mastery of all his instincts and inclinations, and placing them at the disposal of God's will. The sages in Torat Kohanim explained the demand, Kedoshim tihiyu, holy shall you be, as Perushim tihiyu, abstinent shall you be. Rashi explains this by saying, the first step towards holiness is to refrain from transgressions. For example, the ones that are not listed in the Torah, like you're not supposed to talk evil, you're not supposed to eat forbidden food, no sexual immorality, and so on. The next step is abstinence from activities that are improper, even though it's not specifically prohibited by the Torah. So the Rambam explains that while the Torah doesn't explicitly condemn things such as gluttony and intoxication, for example, there's no verse in the Torah that literally says, thou shalt not become intoxicated. Well, even so, the Rambam teaches that one should develop the self-discipline to master his impulses and to live in dignity, because to not do so, well, that implies Quite the opposite. Rabbi Hirsch explains that self-mastery does not mean restricting natural instincts. So in Judaism, human instincts are not intrinsically good or bad. They all have beneficial purposes and limits set by the Torah. In the services of these purposes and within these limits set by the Torah, then everything is good, everything is holy. But when it's separated from these purposes and outside of the limits, that's where evil begins. So recall there's a teaching on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, where once a year the mundane is left behind in order to become as close to God as the angels. Just like the angels, Jews do not eat, they don't drink, or they don't engage in any other earthly activities on Yom Kippur. On this special day, said to be the holiest day of the whole year, Jews worldwide echo the angelic recitation saying, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Holy, holy, holy from the book of Isaiah. The goal is to reach a level of sanctity as the upper beings, saying, let us sanctify your name in the world, even as they sanctify it in the highest heavens. Ki kadosh ani, holy am I, meaning God. God remains holy whether man sanctifies me or not. So in no way can man's conduct affect God's essential holiness, which is infinite and unchanging. Man can only influence the manifestation of God's holiness on earth. So when man transcends his natural instincts, Hashem's conduct of the world correspondingly transcends the laws of nature. Then his divine providence, with all its miracles, become more manifest. The most obvious manifestation of God's majesty is expressed in nature and its cycles. Therefore, the sages relate the name Kov to He, Kov, Fe, to go around, and Hakafa, cycle. So this portion of the lesson, simply put, relates the name of the letter Kov to the Hebrew word cycle. The cycles of nature being the unchanging seasons, the monthly renewal of the moon. These all teach man that there is a pattern and purpose to the universe. So recall the Midrash of Abraham, who was said to, upon seeing the daily rising and setting of the sun and the moon, he realized that the world has a creator. The 7-day week climaxing in Shabbat, the 7-year cycle climaxing in Shemitah, the sabbatical year, the 7 Shemitah cycle leading to Yovel, the Jubilee year, this is all a reminder that God created the world and continues to watch over it. Of course, remember, this is Jewish thought, where the sages correlate these cycles in the physical actions of going around in circles. Okay, this hakafot, these cycles going in circles, are present in the feast of Hoshana Rabbah, the last day of Sukkot, and Simchat Torah, the rejoicing of the Torah, where there are circular processions that are seen as a manifestation of God's holiness. The sages teach that they have tremendous mystical power, especially if the circling is sevenfold, done 7 times. And what is the most popular story of the Jewish nation doing circles around something is the story of the walls of Jericho. The Israelite warriors circled the city walls while the priests blew the shofar, or the multiple shofar, the shofarot. After doing cycles for 6 days, followed by 7 cycles on Shabbat, the walls of Jericho sunk into the ground before Joshua and the children of Israel. According to Rabbi Chia, the miracle of Jericho was commemorated every Sukkot in the temple with this act of circling the temple altar with their lulav and etrog. If you're not sure what a lulav and etrog is, I'm sure you've seen it before. If you've heard of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, it's what every person in this artistic depiction are holding. It's like a big myrtle branch and what looks like a lemon, a citron. It's like a citrusy fruit. So this procession was done once a day on the first 6 days and 7 times on the 7th day of Sukkot, which is Hoshana Rabbah, the Great to Save Us, paralleling the 7 days at Jericho. Now, since the temple no longer stands, Rabbi Chia concludes that a memory of those circles around the altar remains when people march around a Torah scroll with the lulav and etrog on Sukkot. The Torah scroll is held high on the bima, the platform where the Torah is read, as if it were the altar, and everyone exclaims the prayers based on the theme of Hoshana, which is please save. Now, this practice reinforces and finalizes these passionate prayers. Remember, this is all climaxing, culminating the high holidays, right? That God may tear up any harsh decrees from Yom Kippur and grant a blessed new year. On Simchat Torah, the processions take place with the Torah scroll in hand to celebrate the joyful conclusion of the yearly cycle of public Torah reading. So, if you're not already familiar with this tradition in Jewish thought or in Jewish tradition, they read the Torah scroll from Genesis to Deuteronomy. There is a yearly Torah reading cycle. So Simchat Torah is basically the end of that cycle, very in tune with the new year. Basically, right after Rosh Hashanah, maybe it can't be more than 2 weeks after Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, where the cycle restarts. So on Simchat Torah, the book of Deuteronomy is finished, and immediately, right after finishing Deuteronomy, you take the scroll, you unwind it all the way back to Genesis, and you begin to read Genesis. Again, with the idea that it is a cycle. The Torah reading, Torah learning, being in line with the Torah, being in the path of the Torah is not something that you will ever conclude, something you'll never accomplish, something you'll never finish, something you'll never be able to close and put it back on your shelf. No, it's very much so seen as a lifestyle, very much so seen as continuous. Okay, so after the last verse of the Torah is read, followed by the exclamation every time you finish a Torah book, you exclaim chazak chazak v'nitchasek, meaning be strong, let us strengthen ourselves. Seem to be taken from the book of 2 Samuel. And then the cycle immediately begins again with the reading of the first verse of the Torah. Now, the cycle of history began in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden, where man's recognition of God was as clear as day, and where man and all animals lived together in perfect harmony. Of course, this is midrashic thought. This is how Jewish interpreters comment on this nature. So generation by generation, the rabbis explained that mankind's awareness of Hashem weakened in the course of history, and it will return to its starting point in Messianic times, and this we read from the prophet Isaiah. The wolf will dwell with the lamb, and a small child shall lead them. At that time, as on the day man was created, all of mankind will recognize again that God is one. Ki mala haaretz de'a et Hashem, for the earth shall be full of knowledge of Hashem. The Rambam interprets this prophecy of Isaiah as an allusion. This prophecy being the one from the last slide where the young child will lead the animals, that is a prophecy as an allusion to the future relationship of the world's powerful nations to the Jewish people. So instead of investing their time, energy, and means in animosity and warfare, it says that all man will live in harmony and peace and devote themselves to acquiring profound knowledge and recognition of the one Creator. And this is supported by Isaiah's later verse, where the earth shall be full of knowledge of Hashem. So with that, we conclude our lesson on the letter Kof. We'll see you all in the next lesson. Shalom, shalom, and Shavua Tov.